Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Well, today is another exciting day in the shop here at Rust Bucket Restos, and that is because we are going to take this 2011 Dodge Challenger SRT8 392 6.4 Hemi 6-speed, rip it out of this car, and test fit it in the 71 Cuda. So, I can already hear, and I'm sure I'm going to be reading some tears in the comments here, but you know, this is a running, driving parts car, really. It's purchased at an IAI auction. And you know, it is going to be sacrificed. It's a salvage car sold on a bill of sale, but this car is going to do wonders for our 71 Cuda. So the seats inside are sold. I've got a couple other parts sold, but if you guys do see anything that you like, interior wise, none of the airbags went off, body panels, anything, it's all up for grabs, and I promise you I will give you guys an absolute smoking deal. So all the parts that are damaged are going to be thrown on that trailer right there, which is ready to accept every part that will come off of this car. And again, I'm not going to be too delicate with this, okay? So a couple things, you know, there's a lot that we're going to have to remove on the inside of here, but the radiator support is shoved into the front of the pulleys. And actually, a couple videos ago when I did the test drive and did the burnouts in this, unfortunately my fun was cut short because my serpentine belt ended up getting completely shredded because of how this radiator support and the fans and everything else are pushed into that, ripped it off. I lost power steering, and this thing is heavier than hell to turn the steering wheel without power steering. So, but yeah guys, we're gonna take some grinding wheels, we're gonna take a Sawzall and probably cut the front half of this off. Of course, we're going to disconnect the battery because this is still completely live. And actually, I think before I do that, I really don't want to hear what this thing sounds like with no exhaust on it. So that might be actually the first thing that I do. But we're going to try to pull the engine transmission out as a whole, and then yeah, we'll shoehorn it in our 71 Cuda. So let's get this thing up on the lift, let's get the exhaust unbuttoned, and let's hear what this thing sounds like. That sounded pretty awesome. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last time this engine ever makes this car run. It's going to make a car that's a whole lot cooler run, and yeah, save one of the best looking muscle cars of all time. So let's start in on some weight reduction. All right, guys, so our engine's completely on the ground. I'm very, very happy with that. And honestly, it went pretty smooth. Now, a lot of you guys are gonna probably say, why didn't you just drop out the K-frame and everything else? Well, a lot of this stuff is going to be staying with the car. I didn't want to have to take it out, put it back in. This engine will never go back in this car again. So that's why we did that. And we're probably gonna end up shoehorning it in also to our 71 Cuda. Now, a couple things. I mean, you guys saw me kind of stop as I was pulling it out. A few things back here. Just some of these vacuum lines in the backside. I couldn't see them, couldn't really get to them. And then also a lot of these little the press-in clip deals back here, I could not get my hands back there far enough to pull them out, and I couldn't even see where they were attached to. So pulled it out little by little, felt some resistance, stopped what I was doing, figured out what was going on. Another thing too was this the clutch sleeve here. So there's actually a little snap ring that goes around this. I started, I couldn't really get a good look at it. Threw a crow's foot on it, started spinning it around. It just spins and spins and spins, and doesn't come out for whatever reason. So yeah, I look a little bit closer, you could see that snap ring on it, and pop that off, and the whole thing just popped right out, so didn't have to cut that or anything else. So from here, guys, I'm going to get the transmission put up onto a cart. We're going to split the engine from the trans. We're going to get the engine on an engine stand, so that way we can look the whole thing over, check it all out. We can flip it over, because we will have to install our Holley mid-sump engine pan for it to fit the 71 Cuda, and I'll show you guys how to do that here momentarily as well. But man, guys, pretty clean, and again, pretty easy. Just whatever you see attached to the engine and transmission, disconnect it. So comparing it to an old motor, obviously there's so many more connectors and connections. Even on the transmission, actually, there's quite a few on there. But overall, guys, it's really not that bad. So especially having the front end off of this car definitely made this a whole lot easier. But clearing the exhaust manifolds on the side, a bit of a challenge. And then I also did have to pop off the engine mounts as well, or at least the top section of those, so I could pop it up and over that, use the big pry bar, and yeah, came out pretty smooth. So let's go ahead, let's get this tranny off the back of it, put it up onto a cart, and let's get this engine up on a stand. Alrighty guys, so I've got all the engine modifications done, or at least as far as what I need to get the engine fit up into the car. So we got our oil filter, 45-degree kit put on. We've got our Holley oil pan, as you guys saw, and that's pretty much it. Now there are going to need to be some car modifications though, and some significant tunnel modifications, as I've recently learned, to fit the TR6060 6-speed transmission into this car. So guys, what we're going to do from here is that we're going to very slowly, very carefully lower the car down. We are going to set it on top of this cart here. I'm going to position some foam here. We're going to cut this up so that way we can put it in the right places on this front subframe, because I don't want to scratch this beautiful finish that's on the QA1 kit. But we will unbolt this. We're going to take out the upper control arm bolt right there, that nut, as well as the 4 bolts that are holding the entire front subframe in. Drop that down onto this cart. We are then going to take this engine, lift it up, put it on top of that front subframe, bolt it up, and then we're also going to then pick up our TR6060 6-speed and bolt it to the back of the engine. Now, I've already taken the clutch off, I've taken everything else off. This is purely for test fitting purposes, because the TR6060 does require some pretty significant metal modifications to fit. If you guys are running a TKX or a T56, then you really don't need to do all these modifications, but I got this transmission with the car, with everything else, so why not do what I need to do to make it fit? I also know a pretty decent metal guy. So what's gonna have to happen here is that I'm going to slowly lower the car down on top of everything else, and we're gonna trace things out, and we're going to cut out the bare minimum that we need to fit this transmission into the car. Now, from what I've seen so far, I'm gonna have to open up the tunnel quite a bit, as well as cut the entire center out of this torsion support. So yeah, I'm not too excited about that. It looks really good where it is right now, but we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do it. And yeah, the benefit of having that Challenger right there, which is now completely parted out, is that I was able to take everything off that car that bolted that transmission to the bottom of the car, and we're gonna find out how well things fit or what modifications we need to do. I don't think it's gonna be too bad, and again, I can reuse a lot of that stuff that we got off that car. So let's go ahead, let's lower this down, let's get this front subframe off, and yeah, let's start moving some metal, and let's see how much work this is really gonna take. Alrighty guys, so I ran into my first clearance issue down here, and as I mentioned, the transmission will not fit with the stock torsion support. Okay, so you can kind of see up on top right there, a direct hit there, and then the car still has to come down, I mean, another 12 inches or so. And yeah, we're gonna have some big issues here if I keep on coming down. So I went ahead and made some marks. I may actually even bring that a little bit closer to these holes right here. But yeah guys, we're gonna just open up the floor a little bit, because you can kind of see it's pretty tight up in there too. But again, taking as little out as possible. So I'm gonna have to lift the car back up, pull the engine out, make these cuts, bring it back in, test fit it again, and let's see how far we get. There is some space issues, also some clearance issues, excuse me, by the alternator up front. So there's a bit of a seam here, at least the factory spot weld seam, which I've seen a few people install these and they ended up trimming that area. So you can kind of see as we come up this space right here between this tab and also the shock tower here. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna trim that back to the edge of the frame rail. So just take a flap disc, take that all the way back, and then, you know, make sure it fits, and then we'll just go ahead, we'll weld that whole thing up, grind it smooth, and you won't even know that it was completely notched out. So little things, little adjustments, man, seeing that thing in there is getting me excited. So let's go ahead, let's open up this floor, trim that little piece there by the alternator, and let's try to test fit this thing again. All right guys, well I stayed up way too late last night, but guess what? It's in. Front suspension's in, engine's in, transmission is in, rear differential, all the rear suspension, 4-link, everything is at least bolted into the car. And now it's time to start setting some angles. So as you can see here, with no transmission cross member in the car, you know, the transmission's, you know, tilted pretty far down. I can throw a screw jack underneath that and I can push it up quite a bit. Now, depending on if I need more clearance, if I need more angle, okay, the next thing, because you can kind of see where I've opened up the tunnel right there, which really isn't that bad. The worst part, obviously, being having to cut that torsion support, but we're gonna make a hoop to go over that, and then I think I can modify the lower piece here to still work and fit underneath that and support it. But yeah, the next path of resistance here is, unfortunately, that seam between the floor pan and the cowl, or excuse me, floor pan and the firewall right here, okay? So when I started lifting it up in the back, it was stopped by that seam. And if the transmission, if the engine was out of the car completely, I could probably just grind that seam down and not have to open up the floor. But I tell you what, it took a long time to fiddle with this thing and get everything where I needed it to be. So I'm probably just gonna end up opening it up just north of that seam on this side of it. And yeah, it's easy enough to roll a piece of sheet metal and make a new tunnel piece for that. So not too big of a deal. All right guys, so I've got the car on the ground now. I did make a couple of adjustments here. I'm using a couple of different jacks and lifting the transmission up, trying to make sure that I get my angles right. And the angle that does look correct for the motor, just the way that it sits in the car, and then also with clearance issues in the back towards the firewall, is 2 degrees. So driveline angle, pinion angle, right? It's a very intimidating topic. There's a million opinions out there. What I try to do, you never want a 0 degree, like across the board, right? So what I try to do is 2 degrees down from the motor and 2 degrees up from the rear drive shaft. And yeah, that's exactly what we're doing here. And also, you know, I tried it at 3 degrees. You never really want more than 3. So at 2, I have better clearance here with the sensor in the back, and also just the engine looks very square, very flat across the top of that. So I took a bunch of different measurements here, took it on the crank pulley as well as the back of the motor here, and everything actually lines up with the top of the valve cover. So this is a very easy reference for me, but just using a jack here to adjust that and lift it up. Now, lifting it up higher into the car like I had to, I did have to make some more adjustments, and I had to cut out quite a bit more of my trans tunnel here, but I've got really good fitment, good clearance all the way up, and actually this shape should be very, very easy to fold up and to bend and make my own transmission tunnel. So really not too bad. You know, what I will have to do though, I am going to put a hoop in where the torsion support was, up and over the top, and then of course we'll bolt in on the bottom side of the transmission, the cross member there, and make custom mounts. So in the back here, I went ahead and also set my the driveline angle here at 2 degrees as well. This one obviously pointing up and not down. So we've still got our brackets up on the top here that are kind of free and free spinning. I'm going to make sure that those are symmetrical across the back, and yeah, weld them guys in, and our rear axle should be completely set. And again, very, very important, guys, that you do this at ride height with load on the car. And this car, you know, approximately, obviously we still have interior, we still have more things that are going to go on it, but there's a lot of weight on this car right now, and it should be a really, really good representation, or at least within adjustment, of course, with either shimming the transmission up or down to get that angle right, or to adjust the upper control arms on the rear axle. Now, moving up to the front, I would say that this entire job, what's made this kind of the hardest part of this entire thing, is really figuring out the transmission cross member. So nobody makes a cross member with the exception of US Car Tool, and you have to buy their tunnel kit with it, and it's insanely expensive. I think the tunnel kit's like 900 bucks just for the tunnel, and then the mount kits or the mounts are another 300 bucks or 400 bucks or something crazy like that. So here's what I did. This cost me less than $5. Okay, so I reused the factory TR6060 mount here. I ended up flipping it over so that way the bolts still have access on the inside here, and then I took the isolator off the bottom along with the mount. Okay, so pause right there. Now, when you're looking at a factory transmission cross member, this is what it looks like. Okay, so this bolts up into place underneath the car. Obviously this was added by me, and I'll get to that here in just a second. But after some trimming and about 20 different mock-ups, this is what we're left with. And it looks like a big ugly smiley face or a stingray or something, I don't quite know, but it does fit, and it fits really, really good. So, you know, this transmission's a bit bigger, you know, than what I had originally in the car. So that said, you know, this has to be trimmed out here. I am going to go ahead, I'm going to come back and box this and put some thicker plate here on the bottom. But on the shelf, I had this transmission mount from another build and was able to use that, drill some holes, bolted it into the bottom, notched everywhere that I needed to for access, and then I went ahead and I made this 1/2-inch plate that is actually going to screw into the bottom of that, and this plate is going to get welded to the original cross member, just like that. So this is going to be a very big and beefy mount, utilizing factory mounts with the factory cross member, just with an extra tab on there, and I have an isolator as well that I've been able to get on there. So it's pretty simple. I've seen a lot more complex or complicated ones that people have done, but there's no sense in getting super complicated, and having that 1/2-inch plate is way more than what they had from the factory originally, so it should be fine. And again, this all comes after setting your transmission and your driveline angle. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a 2 degrees down. You can measure it in different spots here. And guys, so what I did here, I ended up measuring the angle off of the output shaft here on the back of the transmission. You can measure it in a bunch of different spots. The top of the valve covers work. Yeah, there's a lot of different reference points on the engine that you can look at, but I figure this is probably the most reliable here just in that exact spot. So again, 2 degrees down. So before you go welding, chopping up, modifying any of your cross members or anything like that, make sure your angles are set correctly. So from here, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna bolt everything up. I'm gonna weld in this plate here to the bottom of the mount that's on the transmission. And yeah, after that, we should be able to pull the jack out, verify our angles with our digital gauge, and the front will be completely wrapped up. So let's go ahead and let's get this done. All right, guys, so I got my bracket welded in here, and now kind of the true test. Pull this jack out. Didn't move, and 0.2 degrees off. I'll take it. So we can also still shim this, and if we really need to, but oh, actually there's a bunch of gunk on the bottom side of that, so let's double check that. Ooh, even better. I'll take that. So, all right, so now I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna pull these brackets back out of here. We've gotta add that beef up plate here at the bottom of our original cross, ouch, that's still burning hot, on our cross member here, as well as weld the inside of this bracket here to that plate. And yeah, wrap this thing up, and I think at that point, this thing will be ready to roll outside. All right, guys, so as you saw, very, very simple, not making it any more complicated than it really needs to be. You know, again, bolting into that factory transmission location, bolting into the factory E-body location here with the torsion support, very simple transmission mount, 1/2-inch plate bracket here, and it's absolutely rock solid. Most importantly, 2.1 degrees. I'll deal with that extra 1/10 of a degree. And actually, I think I might make up for it when I go to put in these upper bolts here. Yeah, it'll pull everything in nice and tight. But again, very, very clean, very, very easy. So not really a whole lot left with this swap, at least from the bottom side here. Now let's go ahead, let's hop up on top. We're gonna need to do some work on the inside because I would like to retain, you know, that factory loop there. Although it does land directly on top of the shifter, so we may have to do something a little bit custom. But for all intents and purposes, everything on the bottom side of this car is all wrapped up. So let's take a look at the top. All right, guys, so taking a look at the top here, you can see that, you know, the original tunnel went from right here over the top to right here. And obviously this is not going to fit in its new location here with this new transmission in here. And also something else to add on top of that is that there will be a shifter installed right there. So you can see it's kind of overlapping the edge of that, especially, you know, depending on the throw of the transmission. I believe right now it is in the forward position here, but chances are whatever I come up with to go over the top of that, I will have to end up notching that out to account for that new shifter. So I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bend up some pieces to go up and over here. We're gonna keep those same dimensions of the original torsion support, go up and over the top, and then probably sheet it together with some sheet metal over it to make it nice and strong. And also I'll probably weld on maybe some tabs or cut in some tabs at the bottom of that, so that way when I weld it in, I can weld it where the old torsion support was cut out, as well as down here in this recess where that little sleeve is for the bolts that go through that cross member. So let's go ahead, let's get something bent up and do a little bit of test fit. Alrighty guys, so I've got my hoop all welded in here to go over the top of my transmission. All said and done, the measurements ended up being about 3/8 of an inch or so, and it's completely boxed in on the inside. It's a solid piece, and man, it's absolutely solid as a rock. I went ahead, I peeled back the floor pan, I welded it across the top here, and then once we drop the engine and transmission out and I get it mounted up in the rotisserie here in a day or so, I'm going to do a little bit more welding and put some beef up plates on the inside, and I'll show you guys that probably in a future video, along with shaping and fitting the tunnel over the top of that guy. We've got some window channel work to do. We've still got a couple little odds and ends, little metal work here and there. Still got the bullet hole in the bottom of the door. No idea where that came from, but we've still got a lot of little stuff to fix before I get it blasted. But I have the blaster coming in 4 days. So in that amount of time, we got to get all that stuff done. We got to get our doors gapped. We've got to get, man, a lot of just little stuff that takes a lot of time to do. But of course, I'm going to have to drop out the front suspension, the engine, transmission again, the 4-link, and also play musical cars here and get the Charger down on wheel dolly so I can steal that rotisserie for a couple days. So we're going to blast it, we're going to epoxy it, and we're going to move it on to body work and hopefully wrap up maybe a round or two of blocking on the car before the car show on July 22nd in Evanston, Wyoming, guys. You don't want to miss it. Those of you guys that are going, I can't wait to show you guys, get your feedback, and yeah, it should be a really, really good time. But I'm going to go ahead and cut off the video here, guys. So, and I'm going to keep on keeping on and get to work on all the other little stuff that I already shared with you. So if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button, guys. Stay tuned. Should be at least 2 videos this week, maybe even 3, because I'm going to get to work right away on getting these doors done before I pull all the weight back off the car. So be safe. I'll see you guys again real soon.